Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Corner. Last week we did a spotlight on the hemp building industry, so if you're interested in learning what it means to build with hemp, what the benefits are, and who some of the United States-based companies are, I'll link the video right up here so you can check that out. But this week we're going back to the classic format of just talking about the news. To kick this episode off, we're circling back on a topic that I have discussed a couple weeks ago, but now it's been made official. Governor Kathy Hochul has signed this piece of legislation that's going to allow hemp farmers who have cultivated and harvested hemp in New York the past 2 years to apply for temporary distribution and cultivation licenses for the adult use cannabis market. This is in efforts to ensure that there's adequate supply when the sales commence, most likely in 2023. But it's also an effort to have an equitable industry. New York is talking a lot about how they want to have the most equitable cannabis industry in the country, and it's doing things like this that are going to actually make that a reality. So up next, we have a Colorado lawmaker pressing for cannabis science review to look fairly at the benefits as well as harms. So there was a piece of legislation that passed in Colorado in 2021, and one part of this legislation is that a scientific review is required to look into the potential harms of certain products that have concentrated THC. And so this lawmaker is saying, hey, let's just be aware of the bias of this research and not just look for potential harms, and let's take a look at the potential benefits as well. Historically, a lot of the research that's been done into cannabis has been with the intention of finding negative impacts or negative side effects of cannabis. So that's what they find, and then that's what they present, and they don't even look at the positive impacts. So then when people consolidate all of this research, it's overwhelmingly negative. And so they're just saying, hey, let's be aware of what kind of research we're consolidating here to do this review. And I want to use this as an opportunity to make people aware of two different scientific reviews that have been done by the government over the past 80 years. So the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was implemented, and then Fiorello LaGuardia, who was the mayor of New York City, in 1944, he publishes, along with a team, they published the LaGuardia Committee, or the LaGuardia Commission. And it basically looks into the effects of cannabis, who consumes it. The intention was to see if reefer madness was a real thing, like if people really went crazy smoking cannabis and consuming cannabis products. The result of that was that, hey, this is actually not a dangerous substance. It actually makes people pretty mellow, and this shouldn't be prohibited. This should be regulated a little bit differently. That commission is ignored. Fast forward to 1970, the Controlled Substances Act is put in place. Cannabis was supposed to be temporarily assigned to Schedule 1, which is where it still is now. It was supposed to be temporarily assigned to Schedule 1 until some research could be done to establish whether what schedule it should be. So that research gets done. It's called the Shafer Committee. And it basically said we should actually be regulating cannabis similarly to how we're regulating alcohol. That report was completely ignored. And as you know, cannabis is still a Schedule 1 substance. So if you're interested in these topics, which if you're watching this video, I'm sure you are, I definitely recommend just doing a quick Google of Shafer Committee, LaGuardia Committee, and just read up on them. Quick reads and pretty interesting cannabis history. Moving on to the industrial hemp related news, we have processing coming to South Dakota. So there's two different companies who are saying we are going to set up fiber processing facilities in our state. They are A.H. Meyer and Sons and Dakota Hemp. So as I'm sure you're aware, if you're watching these videos, you know that in order for there to be a thriving hemp industry in the United States, it's going to be very regionalized. Wherever the hemp is being cultivated, there needs to be a processing facility close by, because it doesn't make economic sense to ship biomass hundreds of or thousands of miles. So this is a couple years out. Obviously, it's a massive monetary investment, and building the processing lines, getting that infrastructure put together is going to take time. So this is not something that's immediately going to pop up in South Dakota like this year. Probably be 2023, 2024 when these companies get up and running. But great to see nonetheless that there are business owners committed to the industry in South Dakota, which will then give farmers kind of reassurance to say, hey, if we grow hemp for fiber, Dakota Hemp and A.H. Meyer and Sons, they're going to have processing and they're going to be buying our biomass. Up next, we have an article from Lancaster Farming, which is a great podcast. If you're interested in these topics, just search Lancaster Farming on any podcast platforms. Eric Herlock does a great job. And they also do these news articles. And so this article is about 3D printing construction company to build with hemp in Pennsylvania. So the company is called Black Buffalo, and they make these massive 3D printers that print with a concrete ink, is what they call it. And they say the ink that they use is actually stronger than concrete, and it's a great solution for affordable housing. They can build these homes really quickly as well. And they have purchased a 106-acre property in Pennsylvania to set up manufacturing operations. And so how does hemp come into play here? Well, they're saying that they want to replace one of the not so environmentally friendly ingredients in their ink with a hemp product. I believe they're using micronized hemp hurd, so essentially like powderized hemp hurd, and they're going to be using that as one of the ingredients for their ink, for this more sustainable ink. And so when I first heard about Black Buffalo printing with hemp, or their intention to print with hemp, I thought they were going to be making these machines to print with hempcrete or hemp lime, similar to this picture here of the e-Reezy spray application system. I thought it was going to essentially be an automated version of the e-Reezy spray application system. That is not the case. Like I said, it's going to be like powderized hemp hurd. It's not going to be full little hemp hurd wood chips. And so these structures that Black Buffalo could build, if this works out with their hemp ingredient, they're not going to be like a hemp lime insulation home. It's going to be very different. If you've watched the last video that I made about hemp building, you'll know one aspect of hemp lime walls that provide the benefit is that there's little air pockets all throughout the wall. And that's because the wood chips do not compact completely. So there is some air pockets throughout the wall, which give it a lot of beneficial properties. Whatever Black Buffalo is doing with hemp is not going to do the same thing, but regardless, they're using hemp, more environmentally responsible input than whatever they're using right now currently. So great to see this, great to see investment again in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania seems like it's really going to be a hub for industrial hemp cultivation, processing, and innovation. So keep an eye on Pennsylvania, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Black Buffalo ends up doing with the hemp, because again, this is just going to increase the demand for hemp fiber, which then gets more farmers to grow it, more people to invest in processing. It's all kind of a domino effect here. Up next, we have the Hemp Feed Coalition releasing a statement off of an application that was denied by the Association of American Feed Controls officials. So the Hemp Feed Coalition in 2020 submitted an application for hemp seed meal for laying hens. They found that the eggs had higher nutritional benefits and did not have any cannabinoid transference. So just some background, the FDA has found that hemp grain products are GRAS certified, which is generally regarded as safe for human consumption and have been established to not contain cannabinoids. Well, this Association of American Feed Controls denied the application and basically said they requested for further tests at lower cannabinoid detection levels. And so the Hemp Feed Coalition has come out and said this request for lower levels of detection of compounds that are physiologically not produced in the ingredient is why the HFC and the industry at large continues to be frustrated with bureaucratic hurdles. These applications are expensive, they take a lot of time, and it's just, I don't know if it's a lack of education or if there's some reason that this association doesn't want hemp feed to be approved. It doesn't make too much sense because obviously, like I just said, FDA said these products are generally regarded as safe for human consumption. One would think that they would also be safe to feed the animals that humans are then consuming byproducts of as well. So if you've watched some of my past videos, you have maybe seen me talk about this farm in Pennsylvania that actually is already feeding hemp seed to their hens that are laying eggs. And so how can those two things exist here? Well, I did some research, and it's Kreider Farms operating under the brand of Chickies Creek. They have eggs that are from hens that are being fed a nutritional meal with like 20% hemp seed. And they have found that these eggs are actually more nutritious than traditional eggs from hens that are not being fed hemp seed. And the only reason that this Kreider Farms is able to feed hemp seed to their eggs or to their chickens is because they submitted a self-designation to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture that was approved for hemp seed to be generally regarded as safe. They also submitted that same self-designation to the FDA so that they could sell their product across the country. It has not been addressed. yet. So they're only being sold in Pennsylvania. Basically, that's kind of the steps for any company who wants to sell products that come from an animal that was fed hemp. They need to submit a self-designation, essentially. So no one can just piggyback on Crider Farms' approval. They need to do it themselves and provide their own research and all these things. So it's a bureaucratic mess right now, but hopefully this kind of gets cleared up as more light is shed onto this problem. Speaking of problems, we have hemp farmers being forced to destroy crops over the USDA rules. So this is specifically referencing Tennessee and how 42% of the crops are being found non-compliant with the requirement of THC levels below 0.3%. So, I mean, this is crazy. Almost half of the crop in Tennessee is being destroyed because of this arbitrary percentage. And so there's some work being done to increase that to 1%, which would help these farmers out. It'd be a lot easier to stay under 1% as opposed to 0.3%. But just wanted to shine a light on this to educate people on why there's all this talk about increasing this THC level to 1%. And while we have 42% of farmers destroying their crop, the next segment here is about a restaurant called Buds and Brews that's going to be opening in Nashville. And so this restaurant is going to be offering infused sauces, essentially. So they'll have regular sauce for ketchup, barbecue sauce, all these different things. They'll also have an infused version. And so when I heard that, I figured, oh, all right, they're making Delta 8 THC infusions or just CBD. Delta 8 is this big loophole, and we see Shopify closing down stores, online e-commerce stores that are selling Delta 8. All these different states are creating their own legislation to prohibit Delta 8 just because it kind of found its way through in the Farm Bill. And so I just want to walk everyone through what my experience was doing some research on this topic. And so this restaurant was founded by Michael Solomon, and he's the owner of Craft Cannabis, a seed-to-shelf hemp cultivation and manufacturing facility in Tennessee. I said, okay, let's go to Craft Cannabis. Let's see what this is about. All right, so they're just growing hemp for CBD in Nashville. So then we scroll down, shop legal THC. So I said, okay, sure, he's selling Delta 8 THC products. So then we go here. And now we're at his other company, the Holistic Connection. So I see recreational brownie, 400 milligrams. So, all right, let's see what this is all about. So right at the top, it says Delta 9 edible brownie is chewy, delicious, and packed with 400 milligrams of full spectrum premium hemp flower extract and 32 milligrams of Delta 9 THC. This is Delta 9. This is not Delta 8. I have no idea how this guy is selling these products and how he's opening a restaurant where he's going to sell Delta 9 infused products. His whole thing is saying this product is less than 0.3% THC by weight. So that's how he's interpreting the Farm Bill, is when this was intended for 0.3% THC by weight of the plant, not of the byproducts. This is like the definition of operating in the gray area. This is very risky in my opinion. I'm sure there are some lawyers that have advised this guy and his businesses because he seems successful, has a handful of different companies, starting this restaurant. I just don't really know how I feel about this. I think this is kind of a hindrance to the regulated cannabis industry, where we have 42% of farmers trying to follow the rules and their crops are getting destroyed, where we have this group that's really just operating in the gray area. My personal opinion, I don't think this is going to last very long. There's no element of like trying to hide what they're doing either. They're getting press for opening this new restaurant and it's all online. You can go buy these things. So it's just kind of crazy to me, really. It just highlights the need for further legislation that clears up some of these not super specific regulations with the way cannabis and hemp is currently being regulated. But just it's kind of crazy situation here in Tennessee. So one of the last segments for today is about Arizona colleges and how they're getting a windfall from cannabis sales. So in 2021, Arizona did almost $2 billion worth of sales of adult use cannabis. And in the regulations, they have 16% excise tax, and 1/3 of that, I believe, Yeah, 1/3 of that 16% excise tax goes to community colleges. And so this article has a highlight of every community college that received funds, how much they received, and what those funds went to. So we have Maricopa Community College received $17.2 million. They put $7.6 towards operational costs for skill centers. So there's a lot of investment into, there's some infrastructure investment. There's some investment into kind of beefing up specific offerings that these colleges have. So this is awesome. I think this is a great example for other states to look at. On one end, from the tax revenue going to a good end use, and then also the transparency that they're providing everyone to know where that money's going. So I think this is great. And then up next, sticking on the topic of colleges, we have the NCAA raising cannabis testing thresholds for student athletes. Previously, the limit was 35 nanograms per milliliter of THC, and that would cause you to fail a test. That's been increased to 150 nanograms per milliliter, and they're also reducing the repercussions if you test positive for cannabis consumption. So I did some research and to see, like, okay, how much is 150 nanograms per milliliter? There's a lot of variability here based on your body composition, how much you consume cannabis, how active you are, how hydrated you are, all these different things. So, but my conclusion was that, as long as you didn't smoke a joint right before you went to go take the test, you should be under 150 nanograms per milliliter, even if you consume on a regular basis or a somewhat regular basis. These kids are all in shape. They're exercising every day. THC metabolites get stored in your fat. So if you're burning fat, you're less likely to have higher concentration in your body. And so this is good because there's no need for student athletes, especially with this name, image, likeness law passing, where these athletes can now make money off of their college careers because the colleges are making a ton of money off them. It's good to see that failing a test for cannabis is not going to impact their ability to get an education, to play their sport, and potentially go on to professional sports in the future, or just to make money while they're in college if they're good at the sport that they're playing. That wraps up Cannabis Corner episode 8. Really appreciate you watching this video and your support of the channel. If you're not subscribed already, please do so. And if you like the video, please actually like the video on YouTube. It'll help me get the video out to more people. If you think there's someone you know that might enjoy this content as well, please share the video with them. And I'll be back next week for another episode.